the world's largest structure, but the British destroyed it in 1897.
Wow.
It was 4 times the length of the Great Wall of China.
But they made interconnecting walls that stretched over 10,000 miles.
It was long enough to encircle the continental United States 3 times.
How have I never heard of that?
That's what I'm saying. Even the people of Nigeria now, they don't even know about it.
And yet, few in the West know about it. Even fewer dare talk about one of the greatest achievements in human history, from one of the greatest civilizations in human history. One so great that in order to allow for the pillaging of its people and its resources, all traces of it had to be erased. Its palace, more beautiful than Buckingham Palace at the time, had to be burned, turned to ashes so that they could convince the masses that people of African descent cannot build civilizations. And true to their willingness to diminish this achievement, they labeled this Great Wall as a moat. Really, an insult to the magnificence and splendor of this 8th wonder of the ancient world, the Great Wall of Benin. The Benin Wall was able to encircle not just the capital of the Benin Empire, but several adjacent cities. And it wasn't just a defensive wall, but with its 9,900 miles, it also served as a veritable road network that safeguarded trade and movement of people. You can think about it as a multi-purpose wall. And the civilization that built it is as magnificent as the Great Wall. It's a civilization that had a 7,000-year-old writing system, independent from the hieroglyphs, and a math system using a base 20 and 60, just like the Sumerians. Oh, by the way, there are no independent European and Arab writing or number systems. They all derive from the African hieroglyphs and base 10 number system. Benin City was also one of the first cities to have a semblance of street lighting. Huge metal lamps, many feet high, were built and placed around the city, especially near the king's palace. Fueled by palm oil, their burning wicks were lit at night to provide illumination for traffic to and from the palace. When the Portuguese first discovered the city in 1485, they were stunned to find this vast kingdom made of hundreds of interlocked cities and villages in the middle of the African jungle. They called it the Great City of Benin, at a time when there were hardly any other places in Africa the Europeans acknowledged as a city. Indeed, they classified Benin City as one of the most beautiful and best-planned cities in the world. Benin City's planning and design was done according to careful rules of symmetry, proportionality, and repetition, now known as fractal design. The mathematician Ron Eglash, author of African Fractals, which examines the patterns underpinning architecture, art, and design in many parts of Africa, notes that the city and its surrounding villages were purposely laid out to form perfect fractals, with similar shapes repeated in the rooms of each house, and the house itself, and the clusters of houses in the village in mathematically predictable patterns. As he puts it, when Europeans first came to Africa, they considered the architecture very disorganized and thus primitive. It never occurred to them that the Africans might have been using a form of mathematics that they hadn't even discovered yet. At the center of the city stood the king's court, from which extended 30 very straight, broad streets, each about 120 feet wide. These main streets, which ran at right angles to each other, had underground drainage made of a sunken impluvium with an outlet to carry away storm water. Many narrower side and intersecting streets extended off them. In the middle of the streets were turf on which animals fed. Houses are built alongside the streets in good order, the one close to the other, writes the 17th-century Dutch visitor Alfred Dapper, adorned with gables and steps. They are usually broad, with long galleries inside, especially so in the case of the houses of the nobility, and divided into many rooms which are separated by walls made of red clay, very well erected. But a civilization that looked like this before colonization, and had a palace that looked like this, is rarely mentioned, and its wall, which was defending the city and its memory, has also been forgotten. The British, which can be seen here stealing artifacts from the Palace of Benin after having burned it, also burned the Palace of the Oba along with many other palaces in Benin. Oh, and the Benin Empire had a stone pyramid. There is only one existing blurry picture of it. Here it is, before it was, you guessed it, before it was destroyed. And this is just one of the innumerable African ancient relics that were either intentionally destroyed or simply erased from memory. And if they are not erased, they are reassigned to others such as the Arabs or the Europeans who were not there at the time of their building. All this is contributing to the widespread ignorance from all non-black people about African achievements. Achievements such as the medieval city of Gao in modern-day Mali, where archaeologists found multi-story architecture and a network of underground plumbing. In 1691, the Portuguese ship captain Lourenço Pinto observed, "Great Benin, where the king resides, is larger than Lisbon. All the streets run straight and as far as the eye can see. The houses are large, especially that of the king, which is richly decorated and has fine columns. The city is wealthy and industrious. It is so well governed that theft is unknown, and the people live in such security that they have no doors to their houses." In contrast, London at the same time is described by Bruce Holsinger, professor of English at the University of Virginia, as being a city of thievery, prostitution, murder, bribery, and a thriving black market made the medieval city ripe for exploitation by those with a skill for the quick blade or picking a pocket. The city was split into 11 divisions, each a smaller replication of the king's court, comprising a sprawling series of compounds containing accommodation, workshops, and public buildings, interconnected by innumerable doors and passageways, all richly decorated with the art that made Benin famous. The city was literally covered in it. The exterior walls of the courts and compounds were decorated with horizontal ridge designs, agben, and clay carvings portraying animals, warriors, and other symbols of power. The carvings would create contrasting patterns in the strong sunlight. Natural objects, pebbles or pieces of mica, were also pressed into the wet clay, while in the palaces pillars were covered with bronze plaques illustrating the victories and deeds of former kings and nobles. At the height of its greatness in the 12th century, well before the start of the European Renaissance, the kings and nobles of Benin City patronized craftsmen and lavished them with gifts and wealth, in return for their depiction of the kings and dignitaries' great exploits in intricate bronze sculptures. These works from Benin are equal to the very finest examples of European casting technique, wrote Professor Felix von Luschen, formerly of the Berlin Ethnological Museum. Benvenuto Cellini could not have cast them better, nor could anyone else before or after him. Technically, these bronzes represent the very highest possible achievement. The early foreign explorers' descriptions of Benin City portrayed it as a place free of crime and hunger, with large streets and houses kept clean, a city filled with courteous, honest people, and run by a centralized and highly sophisticated bureaucracy. 10,000 miles. That's 16,000 kilometers. That is simply immense. Benin Empire built a wall that can go 3 times around the United States. In terms of the volume of earth moved, the construction of the walls of Benin is believed to surpass that of the Great Pyramid of Giza, showcasing the immense labor force and engineering skills of the Edo people. The earth had to be dug, moved, baked into bricks, then placed on the 20-feet-high wall. So building a pyramid as a side project would have been easy. Out of all the ancient African historical artifacts that I am most in pain of losing to colonization, this one hurts me the most. Not the broken nose of the clearly black African Sphinx, not the yet-to-be-deciphered Meroitic scripts that historians clearly ignore because it was Nubian, not the hieroglyphics-like writing that was burned in the Great Dutch Purge of Great Zimbabwe, not the bricks palaces in Cameroon, Ivory Coast, or all over West Africa, not the destruction of Carthage by the Romans. No, the lost pyramid in the kingdom of Benin hurts me the most. From its outline we can see that it is majestic. We can even see that there is some form of a statue on top. In fact, here is an old comparison from Mr. Imhotep on the Oba's pyramid. "10,000 miles. That's 16,000 kilometers. That is simply immense. Benin Empire built a wall that can go 3 times around the United States. In terms of the volume of earth moved, the construction of the walls of Benin is believed to surpass that of the Great Pyramid of Giza, showcasing the immense labor force and engineering skills of the Edo people. The earth had to be dug, moved, baked into bricks, then placed on the 20 feet high wall. So building a pyramid as a side project would have been easy. The kingdom is renowned for its intricate bronze, ivory, and wood carvings, which were not merely decorative but served as historical records and religious symbols. The Benin bronzes, a collection of plaques and sculptures, adorned the royal palace and depicted scenes of court life, mythology, and significant events. These artworks demonstrated a high level of technical skill in metalworking. The lost wax casting technique used by Benin artisans allowed for remarkable detail and realism. European explorers and traders were astounded by the quality of these pieces, often comparing them favorably to the finest European art of the time. Two of my favorite pieces are this warrior plaque with both realism and cubism motifs, and this unbelievably lifelike bronze carving of the Queen. The artistic flair shown by the artist is stunning, but to do this on a bronze statue in medieval era shows what Western Africa smelting had going on. But on a religious level also, just like with many African nations, the similarities are striking. The Egyptians worshipped a pantheon of gods and goddesses, each with specific roles and attributes. Key deities included Ra, the sun god, Osiris, god of the afterlife, and Isis, goddess of magic and motherhood. Similarly, the Benin kingdom had a polytheistic religion with a range of gods and spirits. These included gods associated with natural elements like Olokun, god of the sea, and Ogun, god of iron and war. The king was considered a divine entity in both civilizations. The Oba, king of Benin, was also seen as a divine figure, believed to be a descendant of the god Oduduwa and an intermediary between the gods and the people. The Oba played a crucial role in religious ceremonies and was integral to the spiritual well-being of the kingdom. Ancestor worship and ritual offerings were both practiced. All these similarities, and I am passing on many, all these similarities were also present in Nubia and in the majority of great African empires. And there is a simple answer, that ancient Egypt, Kemet, was an African civilization, just like Benin. An early European explorer that visited the kingdom of Benin were awestruck. Also, did you notice how any black African civilization is not called a civilization, but is called kingdoms and empire? Except from the ones that they tried to steal, like the Garamantes, ancient Egypt, Carthage, or the early Sumerians. This is all part of the elaborate deception played on people of color background to make them believe that Africa was not civilized. As I mentioned in my last video, the only good thing about this position stating that black had no civilization and thus did not have intelligence is that we only have to find one. And yet there are so many. We mentioned 42 in our last video. We will add another one today. The formidable kingdom of the Bamalinka, who built 80 feet high wooden palaces, ornately decorated. We are lucky enough to have video of the constructions of these palaces. This video dates back to the early 1900s. Today, the descendants of the Benin Empire have become some of the most successful people in the whole world. In fact, Nigerians Americans are amongst the wealthiest and most educated group in America. They consistently outperform in higher education rankings and household income rankings. Nigeria itself is the biggest economy in Africa, now surpassing Egypt and South Africa. The royal lineage of the kingdom has been preserved. And the king of the Benin Empire, just like his counterpart in the Ashanti Kingdom, can be seen when one visits Nigeria. So, no, it is not evidence that is lacking to show that people of African descent, the children of the Nubio-Kemetic civilization complex, it is not evidence that is lacking to show that they not only started and spread civilization to the whole world, but in Africa, south of the Sahara, They built some of the greatest civilization and some of the greatest historical structures, edifices that colonization sought to destroy and hide, but that we are today unearthing and bringing to light of our collective consciousness. Anyone who has ever clicked the like button, saved our videos in their favorites, shared our videos on social media, or contributed on Patreon or YouTube membership has contributed to helping us share our truth. Make sure you check out our channel videos to make sure you haven't missed any of our documentaries. Join us and see how those who are said to be without history birthed civilization itself.